And it's my great, great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who's Tamim Bayoumi, who's the Deputy Director of the International Monetary Fund. And I think that's a really great way to start to set the scene for our conference today. So thank you very much, Tam. And good luck with this.
It'll need it. Well, thank you very much, everybody. As was just mentioned, my background is from the International Monetary Fund, so I guess you'd call me a policymaker in the division of these groups. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put the future of manufacturing in a wider context of technological change and its impact on the overall economy. And I think you'll see that there's actually a story of both decline for a while and probably a story of a bright future. So let's start by discovering, yes, this does work. Good. Okay. So which screen do you have? Because sometimes you look at, no, yeah, okay. Good. So what do economists have to say about technology and inequality? That's the thing I'm going to start with, because my story is going to be a story about how the IT revolution has been relatively disruptive, but how we will see whether that will continue or it will become more positive. Sorry? Yeah, no. So in the 1950s, Kuznets, who was an economist who was interested in these issues, sort of posited the canonical model of the link between technology and inequality in economics. And this went back to the original Industrial Revolution based on the steam engine. So he's going back to the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. And he posits that technological change has two impacts. Originally, what happens is you get this new technology, you need new skills. So there's suddenly a big demand for skilled workers of a certain type. And because the education system hasn't caught up, you have a lack of that supply. The result is you get a rise in the skill premium, the amount that skilled workers are paid compared to unskilled workers, and that raises inequality. Okay. Now, but after a while, that starts leveling off. What happens is, as you get more used to the technology, the extra demand for skilled workers starts to slow. At the same time, the education system catches up. The technology becomes better adapted to people with less skills. And so you end up with the reverse happening. You end up with the supply of skilled workers going up faster than the demand. And therefore, by the laws of economics, you end up with a fall in the skill premium. And so this was his basic model of what was happening. Now, he was writing in the 1950s, and what he was charting was the fall in inequality from about 1920 through to the 1950s, when he was there. Now, let's talk about information technology and inequality. So basically, that model is a pretty good description of what's happened since about 1980. If you look, the skilled premium for workers has gone up, and therefore inequality has gone up. In addition, as Kuznets also talked about, firms that have been able to harness the advantages of the new technology have also done very well. Since I've spent a lot of my time in America, I'll talk about Walmart. Walmart made it to being the biggest retailer on the planet by having really efficient IT systems which could track inventory. That was how they did it. Okay? So, these things very much matter. So, as with the steam engine, which again, as I say, produced all these new skills you needed. You needed to be able to fix machines, you needed to be able to build machines. With the IT technology, again, you needed to be able to work computers, you needed to be able to program, you need to be able to do all sorts of things. And these all-purpose technologies really matter because they touch everything that you do. I know this because I've just moved into a flat and the Wi-Fi is not working very well, which is just a complete disaster. 30 years ago, you wouldn't have even had a Wi-Fi. Right now, it's a complete disaster in your life. Now, the impact on inequality has also been similar. We've had this big rise in the skill premium. And you can see this in all sorts of measures of inequality. You can see it in what's called the Gini coefficient, which is what economists use to measure the overall distribution of income. But the top 1% is also a preferred measure, the percentage of income going to the top 1%. And the reason for that is you can take it back much further, because in the early part of the century, taxation was mainly on the rich. So you can't follow overall inequality, but you can follow the ratio of income of the top 1%. So here is a graph, and you probably can't see the bottom, but it starts in 1900 and it goes through 2014. And what you can see is what Kuznets was talking about. You have this sort of high levels of inequality through about 1920, and then a gradual fall in inequality. And this is across 7 industrial countries, okay? And then you can see, after about 1980, a gradual increase again. So you see this sort of U shape. Okay. So just in case you thought that this was a sort of theoretical concept, this inequality story, no, it's a very real concept. And obviously the UK's in there. It's the sort of burgundy color. It's come down a little bit at the end, but has risen quite a lot from about 1980 on. Now, I'm going to also argue that the IT revolution was particularly disruptive, even by the standards of these 2 technological revolutions. And the reason is, manufacturing, which was the dominant technology through about 1980, and IT use a very different set of economic inputs. Manufacturing, as I'm sure you're all aware, uses a lot of unskilled labor and requires land to build factories. IT is basically about having skilled workers. I mean, you need other people, but that's the main input. And this really affected where prosperity was. In the manufacturing age, through about 1980, prosperity was in smallish towns with land and unskilled workers. And I'll give you an example. Since I've been living in the US, I'll give you a US example, which is in 1988, Toyota built the largest car manufacturing plant outside of Japan in Georgetown, Kentucky, population 30,000. Okay. Come forward to a couple of years ago. Where does Amazon decide to put its HQ to? The 2 finalists in New York, which then turned its nose up and told them that they couldn't come, and just outside of Washington, D.C. 2 big metropolitan areas. Now, why? Because skilled workers are in these crowded cities. That's why London's done well, that's why New York's done well, that's why San Francisco's done well, and that is why Washington, D.C. has done well. Skilled workers are really what you need for IT. So far, it's a pretty sort of depressing story. You have inequality going up, you have manufacturing sort of floundering, you have towns floundering. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to argue that this has widened inequality in lots of directions. The first thing I've already told you about, the rise in the skill premium for wages. So that just raised inequality between skilled workers and unskilled workers. Okay, so that's the first. But there's more. The second is, of course, that since a lot of the growth is in these crowded cities, what is the thing which is least supplied in these big cities? It's land. So this explains why land prices have gone up like a rocket in all of these big cities. So an awful lot of the benefits of the technological revolution have actually accrued to landowners, who tend to be older and tend to be richer. So you've got, again, an effect on wealth, but you've also got an old versus young split. And the final thing, of course, is you end up with a rural-urban split. And the reason for this is, let's say you're an ambitious person with talent. It's much more difficult now to move to where the prosperity is, because the prosperity is in these extremely expensive cities. So you end up with the rural, a population in the small towns who feel that they can't move to where the action is. So on all these levels, you end up with these splits. And this is quite different from manufacturing, because of course in manufacturing, even though there was a rise in the unskilled skill, the skill premium, the new manufacturing places were in places like Manchester. There were new places. They were originally not very prosperous, and so you raised prosperity in places that hadn't had it before. The IT revolution is not doing that. It's making the places which were already prosperous even more prosperous, and the places which weren't as prosperous, less prosperous. So far, as I say, it's been a pretty depressing story. But the future is not defined by the past. If you remember, when I went back to Kuznets said, this only lasts for a while, because then you all get used to it. The technology becomes easier to operate, the demand for skilled workers goes down, and this technology broadens out. And this is, if you're wondering where manufacturing is going to come in, this is where manufacturing is coming in. Because part of this is that, of course, the IT revolution is really beginning to affect manufacturing, apart from other things. And as the technology becomes much easier to use and much more pervasive, you're going to end up, according to Kuznets, and we have every reason to believe this is true, with a time when actually inequality will start coming down. And in fact, if you look at income inequality in the UK, it actually has been stable for about the last 10 or 15 years. Okay. So it turns out it's been obscured by the fact that because of very low interest rates, wealth inequality has risen. But actually income inequality has been relatively stable. And so I think you can anticipate that it will start coming down. So, and of course, manufacturing will have an increasingly important part to play as it really does harness the benefits of IT. You only have to think about the possibility of robots moving stuff around so you don't have to get people to do it. There are all sorts of things that you can, but I'm not an expert in this and I won't lecture to a set of people who are. But you can see how it could happen. Okay, so lessons for leveling up. Well, there are three. At least three obvious ones. The first is, what do you do about the towns? Well, the best thing you can do is to provide education, but education which gives people the skills that they need in the new IT age, right? So this isn't learning as I did. Well, actually, no, luckily, I only did it for a year. It's not learning Latin, okay? Obviously. So we need better education, but we need to realize that we're in a new world, okay? And obviously, manufacturing can help there. They can teach people the skills that maybe they don't get at schools, etc. But that's how you can help the towns. The other thing is you do have to help people move to opportunity. So you have to be able as a government to provide people who are young and ambitious with the opportunity to move. So some form of subsidized living arrangements is needed. Now, how you target it to those who it will be most beneficial for, that's an interesting question. But I think you can see the basic need for this. And this would, of course, lower also some social tensions. But the final thing is, like most academics, or in my case, policymakers, we've got lots of ideas about how to spend money, but how do you raise the money? Well, who's done well out of all of this? Landowners and the skilled workers. So, tax the people who've done well. So, put a few more pence on the property taxes, and raise the marginal rate on those who've done relatively well. So there's the three lessons I have. I think that we are at the peak of a period of social disruption caused by technology. I think we're going to see that coming down over time. And I think that manufacturing will see its prospects reviving as this technology really seeps into manufacturing. So I do think that the future is not the past. Thank you very much.